So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and announce our very next speaker. She's the co-founder and the CEO for the Future Insights Network. Please help me welcome Maria Villablanca.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I assume this is the clicker. That was a very long walk, by the way. I assume this is the clicker here. Hold on a second. Yep, there we go. So this is me. I am Maria Villablanca. I want to thank you for having me here and for allowing me to speak to you about the general trends in the supply chain industry. I am going to be well, I don't know if you can see that, how big it is, but a little bit about me. I am the co-founder and CEO of the Future Insights Network. I am a creator. I am an accidental influencer. I say accidental because I didn't seek out to become an influencer, but I have obtained the possibility of being able to understand the trends of the supply chain industry. Not many people know this, but I started out my first job outside of university in the supply chain industry in the mid-90s, in the food industry, in Latin America and Chile. I was very lucky to work in the wine industry, so if anybody wants a good tip on wine, feel free to come and ask me. And so it allowed me to see the supply chain industry in the mid-90s and how it's evolved over the last, many years. But I will tell you this, I am not a supply chain practitioner. I am a commercial person. I am an entrepreneur. I have built businesses. I have sold businesses. I have succeeded in business, and I have failed in business as well, which is giving me a very interesting perspective on the supply chain industry. The Future Insights Network is a network of about 130,000 senior supply chain leaders from across the globe in multiple industries. Here are some of the brands that I work with. And I started out this company because I felt that there was a lot of confusion around digital transformation. There was a lot of hype, a lot of noise, a lot of big buzzwords around technology and so forth. And I wanted to help bring clarity to the supply chain industry with regards to digital transformation. I also am a creator, and I am the host of the Transform Talks podcast. I am the writer of the Transform Thoughts newsletter, and I love my job. I get to interview some of the biggest names in the industry. There's some of the people. I've got about 190 episodes on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if you'd like to listen. And we started out the conversation because I was already having great conversations with leaders in this space about the trends in the industry. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could bring these conversations to people? And so I speak with people about ESG, diversity, equity, and inclusion, about transformation, around leadership challenges. And I bring these stories of success, of failures, of learning to the industry. So all of those things. Oh, I've got a little video. I forgot. There's a little video. If you could put play on that, show you a little bit what I do. Let's see. So you can find me on Spotify if you'd like to listen to some of these episodes. And as I said, I cover many topics. Now, all of this has given me a unique perspective. Now, why do I say a unique perspective? I speak to people every single day, whether they are academics, business gurus, leaders, whether they are people that are tech founders. I speak to people about a number of different things. But because, let's go back to what I said earlier, I'm not a supply chain practitioner, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm able to see supply chain from the prism of business value. And so I kind of translate all of the supply chain jargon and supply chain engineering type of conversation to how that adds business value to organizations. So it gives me a unique perspective, and also having worked in supply chain in the mid-90s, I've been able to see the evolution of the supply chain function over the last almost 30 years. I'd like to say it's a bit of a revolution, really, because it's changed fundamentally. And we'll go into that. Because in order to understand what we're all here trying to do, which is to figure out what does the future look like and how it affects all of you, I think we need to delve into the past, the recent past, and the present. So we're going to go into that in the 20-odd minutes I've got left. So let's look at the past. Supply chain is a relatively new term. It's not something that goes back a long time, but the idea of transporting goods to meet demand is a very old concept. Now, one thing I know for sure is that if we look at the past, supply chain has been seen as very much a back office function, a function that is cost-driven, a function that is very manual. It's a function that was associated with the view of planes, trucks, ships, warehouses. It's a zero public acknowledgement if we look at the past. I like to call this my neighbor test. When I started working in this many years ago and I'd move into a new neighborhood, my neighbors would ask me, "What do you do?" And I thought, oh no. I'd say supply chain and people would just had no idea what that meant. So there was zero public acknowledgement. A report by the Association of Supply Chain Management demonstrated there was also very low job satisfaction. And it was very difficult to attract top talent into the supply chain. Now, here comes the cocktail of crisis, our recent past. I had the pleasure of interviewing a gentleman by the name of Vineet Khanna, who was the global supply chain vice president of Nestlé, and we were chatting about the status of the supply chain industry, and he said something which was he believed that the supply chain industry, business in general, was drinking from a very heavy cocktail. And I then borrowed that term, and I wrote about it in my newsletter in October 2022, and I said, this is a cocktail of crisis. Although supply chain has always had crisis, we've had crisis across multiple regions, multiple industries, but I feel that we have a pressure cooker where so many different crisis points are entering all at once that is creating a unique environment of business. And so I called it the cocktail of crisis, and I talked about the current landscape. Now, this isn't news. Everyone here will recognize all the issues we've been facing, whether they are geopolitical issues, economic issues, supply, demand issues, climate change, extreme weather. I mean, all of these things are happening at once. And I don't have to mention the pandemic, war in Ukraine, etc. And I've put a little question mark on here because who knows what the next crisis is going to be on top of all of these crises. And I also wrote complacency, because I feel that that's a big killer in business. We are entering a new era of how we do business, and I believe that if we are complacent and stick to the same old, those businesses will not survive in this new era of complexity and volatility. So let's look at the recent past, the last couple of years, which I believe has offered us problems, but equally, it has offered us opportunities. So there's been a tremendous pressure on supply chain. That's not news, everybody knows this. We have exposed a lack of end-to-end visibility within supply chains, a lack of transparency. There have been issues with supply, issues with unpredictable demand. There's been an over-reliance on single-source suppliers, legacy systems within supply chains, old-fashioned, antiquated ERP systems, and a great deal of burnout in the supply chain industry as well because of the recent past. But I think that we also have a huge opportunity here. One of the things that we identified is that there are agile supply chains. The supply chain industry did a phenomenal job during the pandemic. You had companies that were manufacturing printers turning into manufacturing respirators, companies that were manufacturing different types of colognes and perfumes, doing things to create, antibacterial soap and so forth. Everybody was really great. That spirit of unity showed and demonstrated the agility that the supply chain industry had. What changed was phenomenal as well. Supply chain leaders became highly influential. They came out of the back office, out of the dark, into the boardroom to demonstrate business value and drive innovation. Risk, resiliency, and visibility became a major focus, a major shift, which meant that the focus was less so on cost-driven decision-making and more on mitigating risk. And my neighbor test. My neighbors now know what I do. My mother now knows what I do, which is phenomenal. You can turn on the news and see that it's a mainstream topic. Supply chain also became a phenomenal area to attract top talent because there's a great deal of technological innovation and business value that's being driven. The world gets supply chain. You get supply chain, obviously because of your jobs, but equally, probably your family gets it too because they've ordered something in a supermarket and it's not on shelves or in the furniture, things like that. So, why are we all here? Why am I here? Because you're asking yourselves, what's the next 5 years going to look like? And I think that there's a bigger question here, which is, what is actually at stake within the supply chain? I had the pleasure of interviewing a gentleman by the name of Sami Nafak, who is the Chief Supply Chain Officer of Reckitt Benckiser. It's a very large-scale manufacturer of consumer goods. It's British, but it's multinational. Those of you from America will probably recognize them as the makers of Lysol. And one of the things that Sami talked about, as you can see in the podcast, and you can listen to the episode, is that he felt that the supply chain is just not just critical, but also gives a real competitive advantage or disadvantage. Let's focus on that for a second. What we're noticing across multiple industries, that companies with a strong supply chain, with an agile supply chain, a responsive supply chain, a supply chain that can mitigate risks and can adapt to the environment, is a competitive advantage. And so this gentleman here, whom I did not interview, but I caught an interview, Société Générale, which is a financial services organization, talks about crises giving us the opportunity to create strong supply chains, to transform. And so what am I seeing on a regular basis? The transformation of supply chain. Because guess what? Normal is not coming back. For those organizations that feel that they want to go back to pre-2019, it is not happening. We are living in an era of disruption, volatility, the VUCA world. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that is here to stay across the board. So the themes that I'm seeing for supply chain right now is a huge investment in digital transformation, huge investment in supply chain resilience. And in order to build resilience, you need to look at visibility and transparency. The e-commerce boom is going to continue. COVID-19 definitely demonstrated a growth in e-commerce, and we're going to see that increase as well. I'm seeing a huge level of investment in data and predictive analytics. Let alone, let's talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, large language models like ChatGPT. There's a huge amount of investment in collaboration within the supply chain. We've seen robotics and automation as well, but I think there's a huge focus on attracting talent and skills development into the industry. Now, we talk about diversity, and I don't just mean diversity in terms of race, color, creed, etc. I mean attracting critical thinkers, different thinkers, creative thinkers that can help to deal with the modern age problems that we're dealing with right now. So when I talked to people before the pandemic hit, we talked about transformation, and you will know this. A typical transformation model involves transforming either the technological aspect of a supply chain, the processes within a supply chain, or even the people within a supply chain. That was kind of what we were talking about in general. You might recognize this, the SCORE model, which is the supply chain operating reference model created by APIX in the 1990s, which is your typical plan, make, source, deliver. That is the linear supply chain. And what I'm seeing is a tremendous departure from the linear supply chain. We are now talking about supply chain as an ecosystem, as a living, breathing ecosystem. And so the people that developed SCORE, who are now the Association of Supply Chain Management, and I spoke at their event in Brussels, have developed the new SCORE model. And the new SCORE model talks about plan, source, make, deliver, etc., but transform. And at the center of all of this is the orchestration of all of these things at once. And so this transformational model is what supply chain leaders are building their businesses around. Now, I then created my own model because you have to appreciate I have to talk to supply chain leaders every day, and I want to make sure that I can tackle all the major issues that they're facing. So I went away and I thought, this is before the SCORE model, I saw this model, and I created my model. It's a bit more complicated. But what I did is at the center, I put the macro forces and mega trends that are having an impact on the industry, or every industry today. I then divided this into strategic elements, like, for example, developing a risk-resilient business, being competitive, having more visibility, to the purpose-driven supply chain, which is a supply chain that can withstand climate change, that is more circular in fashion, that has more diversity, that is more transparent. And then from there are all the major elements of the supply chain, the plan, source, make, deliver. But I also implemented technology, which I think plays an enormous part in the supply chain of the future and the business of the future, and then humans, people. Because we are also dealing with another macro force and mega trend, the work from home revolution, the changing landscape of talent, the way that we use humans and machines to interact together, creating the Hue machine and augmented technology or augmented employment. So all of those things, and you can see it on my Future Insights Network website, is how I base my content. So when I speak with people, I'm generally speaking about any one of these topics. Okay, let's talk about risk mitigation. Right now, in order to mitigate risk, there has got to be a heavy investment in digital transformation. And that involves things like AI, machine learning, large language models. I interviewed 2 gentlemen from a company called Ion that asked ChatGPT 100 planning questions. So they are literally implementing ChatGPT within their supply chain. I'm looking at dual sourcing, making sure that you are able to find different types of people to source from. I'm sure you've all heard of onshoring. Well, there's friendshoring now and nearshoring. Also, the digital twin is a very important driver. But I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is the supply chain as the central hub or the brain of business function. It's almost, I've seen supply chain control centers. Think about it as the human body. The brain is the supply chain, which again goes to what I said before, the fact that the supply chain leader has a very pivotal role to play in business strategy, because strong supply chains are the companies that are going to succeed. So I've also seen a lot of examples of supply chain transformation success and failure. Transformation, when I first began it, or conversations, it was about digital. How do I transform my manual processes to digital processes? I then started to see the transformation of operating models, transformation of business models, of processes. So you look at someone like Nike, who changed their model completely and started to adapt a direct-to-consumer approach. And they went directly to their consumers and adapted their supply chains to be able to handle the way that they are more customer-centric And the success for that, what's at stake, is that the brand expanded their growth and they had more sales. Starbucks, interesting example. They use the blockchain to be able to trace the coffee beans from farm to table. And so they were able to respond to the needs of their clientele in giving transparency and visibility. So there's many examples like this. I love, for example, the Unilever model. Unilever has completely done away with supply chain as language for their business. They now talk about business operations because they know that it's at the central hub of business. Let's move on to a bit of failure. Lidl did a digital transformation. I won't mention with who, but they did a software implementation of half a billion euros that failed enormously because it couldn't adapt to their inventory models. As such, not only did they lose $500 million, but they also lost market value. McDonald's, another great story. McDonald's decided that in the UK, they were going to get rid of the plastic straws and do paper straws, right, to become more transparent, more sustainable. What they didn't realize is that the paper straws couldn't be recycled. So all of that was a complete waste, and that whole transformation failed as well. So one of the things I discuss when I interview people is, why are you transforming? What is the problem you're aiming to solve before you embark on a costly and perhaps deadly, to your reputation, transformation? So what is the future and the impact on the agricultural business? Well, unfortunately, the continued growth of e-commerce. That is going to absolutely continue to grow. There's going to be continued investment in sophisticated digital transformation models, digital twin technology, predictive analytics, demand sensing, advanced planning and forecasting. There's going to be there still is a heavy focus on ESG and sourcing materials that are sustainable. There is going to be, unfortunately, I'm very sad to say this, more pressure on container shipping. And because container shipping with regards to e-commerce is lucrative, it's much more lucrative to invest in e-commerce from a container perspective. Unfortunately, the agricultural industry is going to have to adapt to that. So consumer behavior is, yesterday I went to Nordstrom's. I thought, I'm going to go and shop to an actual physical store, and it was empty. There weren't many people there. Why? Because e-commerce is continuing to have a big boom, and that's having an impact on shipping demands. Now, clearly, there's an imbalanced trade flow here. The lucrative e-commerce business is taking up a lot of the pressure and using the container shipments that are not necessarily going to agriculture, who has a seasonal or cyclical way of working. There's going to be more competition from containers, unfortunately. But what are the opportunities? Okay, the opportunities are focused on advanced booking forecasting. Collaborative logistics, I want to talk about that. I'm seeing a lot of people, including competitors, share containers. This is something I hadn't seen before. I'm seeing people that normally would compete with each other actually partner with each other to save time and effort with regards to containers and logistics. There's an opportunity in making sure that you invest in your own supply chain visibility, packaging optimization, that you delve into risk mitigation as well. And here are my top 5 predictions, and I'm going to spend a bit of time here on this one. AI and machine learning is going to take over a lot faster than people anticipate. That is actually happening today. That is, without a doubt, we are seeing generative AI operate within logistics, within shipping, within supply chain, warehousing, within the entire spectrum of end-to-end supply chain. I talk to supply chain leaders that are able to manage billion-dollar supply chains through their phone, and that is not going to go away. We are seeing the utilization of generative AI and machine learning and quantum computing come into the supply chain in a very heavy way. Again, volatility is not going anywhere. That is here to stay. We are going to continue to see volatility, and so there has got to be investment in risk mitigation and adaptability, and more importantly, visibility of your supply chain. Data visibility is also a huge issue. We are bombarded with data points and data entry points coming into the supply chain. And those companies that have a better grip and understanding of their data are going to be the ones that are going to be quicker to respond in case of crisis. Diverse talent, again, is going to be key. Now, here is an important note that I want to spend a bit of time on. It's not just about bringing in people that are different to us. It's about bringing people with different backgrounds, people with perhaps a creative degree, people coming from different types of industries and sectors who will look at things in a different way. I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing a lot of companies perhaps even abandon their demand for university degrees, looking for people to come into their supply chains that have a completely different background to what was traditional. And ESG is not going to go away. It's going to define business reputation. It's something that is here to stay as well. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I will be taking some questions, of course, now. But here's my QR code. You can reach out to me. You can add me on LinkedIn. You can listen to my podcast. I'm always looking for speakers and for great stories. And thank you very much. I'm going to take some questions now. Do we have any questions? Don't be shy. I don't bite. You've got a question?
I think I do.
Anybody in the audience? Supply chain questions? Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not able to predict exactly how it's going to impact you, but I can tell you that supply chain is here to stay.
Well, given that you don't have a crystal ball, I won't put you two on the spot.
Yeah?
Can everybody hear me?
Turn on the mic.
Okay, there we go. Great, wonderful. Now, I know you say you don't have a crystal ball, but if I could real quickly, it's one of these things that you've mentioned ESG at the end, and this is something that when I speak to my clients, and I'll give a bit of background on this here in a moment so that you understand a bit better where I'm coming from. When I speak to my clients, whether they be directly involved in the supply chain, if they're retailers who have their own supply chains but then kind of beholden to a lot of what's happening upstream, how do you see the readiness for companies to actually directly confront that and start investing now? Do you see a lot of talk but no action yet?
No, I see a lot of investment.
Right.
A lot of investment.
Fantastic.
If you think about it, the technology sector in the supply chain industry plus the consulting sector is worth almost $1 trillion a year.
Right.
And there is a great deal of investment there as well as in logistics. I'm seeing the advent of digital logistics and a lot of visibility and track and traceability. Yeah, it's becoming, it's real.
Wonderful. Hey, do we have any audience questions yet? Because I've got another one I can go ahead and raise up. Anybody yet? No.
No. Thank you very much. I also, go ahead.
Sure. Oh yeah,
You had another question, yeah?
I am fully prepared. I have a back channel so I can grab audience questions from other angles. So you mentioned that risk mitigation is an important part of moving forward. So is there any specific risk factors that stick out to you, speaking right here at this point in time?
There's too many risk factors. I mean, all you have to do is look at the news this morning or yesterday, the Panama Canal. Panama Canal is now having an issue with regards to extreme climate change, causing drought. They've reduced the amount of shipping. Reuters is reporting, 36% increase in spot shipping prices. This is not going to go away either. It's going to take they want about another month's worth of rain before they can take action. So in terms of risk, you name it. It's kind of like a bingo card of all the different things that can happen.
One of the things that I know you picked up on, and it's funny that you've already mentioned the canal, is container shipping.
Yeah.
So that's something that we saw particularly with my clients, holding on for dear life for that recent 2020 to 2023 period that you put up there. In terms of how important that is to this audience, what could they do now to support their own business sort of security in the future?
I think there's got to be some investment made in things like predictive analytics to be able to respond quicker to different types of demand or shipping changes, understanding the data, really an investment in technology. There's a question there.
Great. I was going to say, I'll turn it over to the question. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. That was
No,
really
thank you.
informative. I'd just like to kind of point the angle towards the agriculture industry. You know, I definitely agree that technology, AI, and predictive analytics is the way to go for the industry. But I think with agriculture, you're dealing with a lot of these emerging markets. Like for me, I'm from Vietnam, and definitely pickup of these new technologies and these new ways of handling supply chains. It's on the up and coming, but definitely much less reception than us here in the United States. Would that be some sort of barrier to entry when you try to apply these new business models towards agriculture?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. There is increasing regulation and compliance topics coming down the line. If you want to do business in Europe, for instance, there is a great deal of transparency that is going to be needed. And that will be a huge barrier for organizations that don't collect that data, that don't have visibility. Now, it's unfortunate, I agree with you. We have a problem with the democratization of technology across the globe, especially in emerging industries or emerging geographies. But unfortunately, with regulations that are coming in the United States and Europe, if companies and if even the suppliers of suppliers of suppliers want to do business with those geographies, they are going to have to adapt. So I'm seeing, for instance, a great deal of investment by technology companies, as well as by large-scale organizations, the Unilevers, the Procter & Gambles, where a lot of the end products end up. Investing in that. I was recently at the SAP Sapphire event in Orlando, and they gave an example of Madagascan vanilla bean growers in order to deliver the ice cream that they need for Haagen-Dazs or wherever, one of these other places. And they are investing quite heavily in making sure that there's democratization of technology, there's the ability to grab data and provide data, because on this side, the large-scale organization like Unilever and Procter & Gamble, they have a dream of transparency and visibility. They rely quite heavily on emerging countries for their goods. If not them directly, their suppliers do. So there's going to have to be a great deal of investment, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'd say, do we have any other audience questions before I turn it back over to me? Because I've got one more question, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
So you mentioned, I love that, a couple of examples of some failures that you've seen recently, some things that haven't worked well. Do you see, maybe in a sense it's more broadly applicable to this audience, anything from a supply chain perspective that you see companies focus on too much, like dead ends that they invest too much time in that just aren't going to pay dividends?
Yes, I see the shiny new object syndrome happen quite a lot, which is supply chain leaders investing in the newest and latest technology. It's almost like, oh, that person over there has machine learning, I must have machine learning, I must have AI. When in reality, the biggest investment should take place. I mean, I know I talked about digital technology, but there's no point in putting technology on bad processes. So there's got to be an investment in making sure that processes are robust and are able to withstand advancements in technology. So yes, to answer your question, I'm seeing people spend money on tech for the sake of tech and not really trying to solve a problem or even laying out the actual foundation that they need to be able to implement that tech.
I was going to say, my CFO isn't going to watch this, is he? You gotta hope not. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Any other audience questions?
I want to thank all of you. No, thank you very much. Thank you to the team at Soy Connext for having me here. And equally, you can reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Maria Villablanca. You can listen to the podcast. And I want to thank you for all the great work you all do as well to keep the world turning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oh, there you go.